You are now listening to an episode of Hidden Voices, so sit back, relax, and enjoy our community podcast.
Faith, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is the complete trust or confidence in someone or something. It's also defined as a strong belief in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual conviction rather than proof. According to figures in 2015, out of the 7.5 billion world population, there are four major religions that people follow. Christianity leading as the largest with 2.3 billion followers. Next is Islam with 1.8 billion, Hinduism with 1.1 billion, and Buddhism with 500 million. Hi, my name is Samir. Welcome to another episode of Inner Voices, and today we'll be talking about faith, spirituality, and belief. Alongside me today is our co-host Farah. Farah, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Samir.
And we have two special guests with us as well, Marianna and Shagana. Both of you, can you say hi?
Hi.
So just before we get into the conversation, we're just going to have like a little bit of an intro with our guests and our co-hosts. So Farah, if you get us started off, please.
Yeah, so my name is Farah Mohammoud. I am the co-founder and director of UPress, which is a social enterprise based in London. Yeah, so to give you a bit of background, I guess my spirituality and faith. So I come from a Muslim background, it's a religion and a faith that I practice, and it's something that I was born into and something that I love, and it's part of my identity. And it's like in a way, it's something that keeps me grounded, especially with different aspects of life and the challenges that comes with it. And over the years, to be honest with you, when I was growing up, I had a bit of challenges with faith and identity. But as over the years, I've become more, I guess you could say, spiritually connected to my faith and finding inner peace through my belief as well. So yeah, I'd be really interested to explore everyone's faith and spirituality journey as well and their experiences with it. So yeah, good to let's hear from Marianna.
Hi everyone, thank you Farah, thank you Samir. My name is Marianna. I'm an Italian-born living in London. I'm a singer-songwriter and also a charity worker. And I was brought up in a Catholic country, therefore that was the faith that I was brought up following by my parents. But I do now live by the teachings and the liberty of Rastafari.
Thank you, Marianna. It'd be good to hear from Shagana as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shagana. I am Canadian and I used to live in London and got the pleasure of volunteering with UPress. My day job is I do work in the charity sector as well. But currently I'm on maternity leave taking care of a 2-month-old. So very exciting. In terms of faith, I would say I grew up around kind of multiple religions. So my family is Hindu, but I grew up in Toronto, which is similar to London, where there's quite diversity. So I grew up with people with all different faiths and have friends to this day that are different faiths. But me personally, I think I went through believing in something and then eventually sort of I would say I describe myself as an atheist at this moment.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shagana and Marianna. Welcome to today's episode. Yeah, so I'm going to pass on to a co-host to kick off a few questions that we'll all dive in and give our perspectives as well. Samir?
So yeah, we're going to dive into different aspects of faith and belief. I have a base question, which is what is your beliefs? But you guys have answered it already. But I guess I'll dive into it a bit more. How has your beliefs changed over the years, and how do you think it's affected you? So this is an open question. Anyone on the table can answer this.
Well, I guess because I kind of said it in my intro, I can go first with that. So I kind of mentioned that growing up. So my family, I would say, is Hindu, although certain members of my family have now kind of married in and have changed to other religions, but primarily I grew up around Hinduism. And I would say my mom is a very more than religious, I would say she's a very spiritual person. So she's okay with she can go to any sort of place of worship and she'll pray. She just thinks God is God. And so I kind of grew up always thinking there was a God, but I feel like God growing up for me was something to be feared. It wasn't necessarily, yeah, like it was sort of this idea of like, if you don't do this, God's gonna punish you, or there's always this element of like, you have to be careful of God. And I just remember as a kid, and as kids do, like you test that. Like I remember my mom would always be like, small things like you have to pray before you go to school, or else, like for your exam, or like for this and that. And I remember I took that very seriously growing up. And then I remember, and this is a small thing, but I remember one day I forgot to pray. I forgot to pray, and then I went, and it was either an exam or something was happening at school, and it was the same. Like I did fine, and then it was only afterwards that I was like, oh my God, I forgot to pray. But then something in my little kid's mind went, okay, wait a minute. Like I've been taught this whole time that if I don't do this, something's going to happen, and I always sort of have to follow these rules. And it was like, I remember that as a distinct turning point for me as a kid, realizing like, oh, okay, actually the same thing could still happen whether or not I prayed or not. And I think it just slowly started to lead to these like questions of like, wait, why do we do this again? And like, why are we fearful of God? Or like, why did God do this? And I think and I'm sure you've heard sort of these things before where it started to be like, okay, but why are these bad things happening? If I was always taught God is this almighty being or entity, but yet I started to just have questions of, okay, but why does this happen? Why are these people persecuted? Or why are these different religions fighting with each other if everyone believes in God? So I think eventually for me, it just led to so many questions that I didn't feel like I got the answers that made sense to me. And it almost became easier just to, I don't want to say not believe, because I'm still very fascinated by other people's faith and understanding religion, I guess from a historical perspective, or just sort of what it does for people individually. But I just found for me, it became easier to just not take part and have faith in any sort of religion, instead of sort of following a religion that I felt like I was very skeptical about, or just had so many questions and things didn't make sense to me, or people were so judgy about, at least again, that was my experience having grown up. But yeah, so I think that's sort of what has led me now to identify as an atheist. And to be honest, even identifying as an atheist was hard for me to do, because I felt I'd grown up around people who were religious, and it was very hard to say, actually, like I still remember the conversation where I had to tell my mom I didn't believe anymore. I think she sensed that. She's a type person. I remember when I moved to London, she put like a picture of like a god, like a spiritual like little picture in my suitcase for, like safe travels and, things like that. I'll let her do. And I'm like, okay, sure. But I remember one time she asked me if I believed in God, and I had to just honestly tell her it was a no. And I did respect, and this is what I appreciate about her. She heard it. I could tell it made her sad, but she left it at that. But yeah, so so that's sort of how my journey is now. And I don't know how it really affects me day to day, other than I still, I don't know if there's sometimes a misconception when people say they're atheists as if they don't have kind of just values that guide their life. Because I still think it's important, to be a kind person. A lot of my motivation, even kind of working in the charity sector, is, wanting to do good for the world, the community I live in, the planet we all share. So those are just things that I think just guide my day to day. And I personally just don't need religion for that. Like that's still just my guiding value that I live by. So yeah, so hopefully that all made sense.
Yeah, it did. It made a lot of sense as well. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that story as well. And while you were talking, I was trying to think as well about my own experiences. And I think, I think we've had this conversation before, Shagana, and I think faith as well as spirituality and belief, sometimes a lot of the time it's kind of like you're expected to believe certain religions or follow certain practices. But I always say, like, especially in our line of work, we work in the third sector, so we get to meet quite a lot of different people from different backgrounds and different ideology and beliefs and different journey paths as well, and experiences that they've faced. And I think reflecting back on some of those conversations and people I've met, and I always find that interesting that sometimes certain people and certain groups try and force you. They force their belief on you, and I'm a firm believer that every choice that you make is your choice. Your faith is a very personal aspect and spirituality. So as long as you're not harming anyone and it's doing good for you, it should be your personal choice. And I think for me, it comes from that point of view, like growing up and looking for, I guess, looking for positive role models, looking for a journey in a way, and also identifying what's important to me. I had the opposite effect, in a sense that my faith brought me closer to inner peace and inner I guess inner purpose as well. So for me, it's been very personal and very a very and sometimes very challenging journey itself to reflect on religion and my faith and what I believe, and also obviously some of the stereotypes and stigma that comes with that part of my identity. But I've always used it as a means for me to reflect and also connect with a higher being, and knowing that there is a purpose to everything that in this world. But again, this is subjected to my own beliefs and my own journey. So it's quite interesting to hear your story, Shagana, and also be interested, like, just a follow-up question. First of all, I know you're a recent new mother to a beautiful daughter. Congratulations as well. Before we hear Marianna's thoughts as well, I want to pick your brain a little bit. Your experience with your mother and your faith, and now as a new mother to a daughter. Later on, what would you give your daughter the freedom to choose what she believes, or would it? What steps would you take in that aspect moving forward?
Yeah, so I think my approach, it's actually funny because recently my sister-in-law actually asked me, because I'm vegetarian, for example. And so my sister-in-law asked me, "Oh, are you going to raise her to be vegetarian?" Um, and like, what happens if she wants to try meat and all that stuff? And so I think my approach is very similar kind of across the board, which is, I obviously live in a certain way, but it doesn't mean that's the only way to live. It just means, like, while you're in this house, like, I'm not going to cook meat, but she wants to try meat. That's totally, I want her to have that experience and make a choice for herself. And I think it's the same thing with faith. I do think it's important generally to be aware of the world you live in, so to know that people do have different religions and you have to be respectful of that and what that means. But yeah, and again, I will be very kind of honest, because me and my partner are both atheists. But we've had numerous conversations where I have expressed that I think it's important to still be able to say, hey, this is what Christianity is and this is what Islam is. And you can decide for yourself if you want to partake in any of these religions, if you don't. But I think, again, the main message across the board is just to be respectful, have empathy for other people. I think those are kind of the things I want her to instill, because I think, just like, I mean, we can all think about that. Like, I'm sure when you're a kid, there's so many things you did or believed in, and they change as an adult, and even as an adult they keep changing. So I think it's less about being like, hey, you have to choose something and stick with it, versus like, hey, be aware that there's all these things and it's okay to change your mind. And I think just be respectful and empathetic and considerate, and just you're human on this earth, and you just want to be mindful that there's not one way to do anything. And exactly what you were sort of saying, Farah, about as long as it's sort of doing good and you're not harming anyone and it's benefiting you, I think that for me is the most important. So, hey, if she ends up being like, I believe in Islam, like, I would totally respect that. And that's her choice. And I would just want to support her in whatever makes her kind of the best version of herself. So I think that's going to be my approach. But of course, I'm already learning with 2 months of parenting is like, you can have an approach and there's like theory, and then practice will might differ greatly, and it might be harder or easier, who knows. But that's sort of my guiding post.
Thank you, Shagana. Very interesting point of view, and I love your approach as well. And I agree with you. Like, you could have a strategic approach to, like, how things will be, but time only changes the circumstances. But it's beautiful to see, like, both you and your partner are open to raising a kid, and also just raising them to be make their own choice and be independent and live a fulfilling life as well. And I think that's what, for me anyway, I think spirituality and belief is a personal choice, and it shouldn't be put pressure on someone to believe or follow an ideology, but it should come from an educational point of view, where the person makes an informed decision. and just like in many aspects to life as well. So beautiful example there, Shagana. Thank you for sharing that with us. Marianna, it'd be really good to hear your viewpoints as well.
Yeah, my journey is not very different from what I've heard so far from all of you guys. You know, it's funny that me and Shagana have never met in the flesh, but we have some similar journeys. It makes me think of how every human being that walks on this planet thinks of each other, of having very different lives and very different experiences, but we're all having a human experience. And that's one thing that I've been thinking about quite a lot recently. But to go back to the question about how the faith has evolved through the years for myself, I was brought up in Rome, in a Catholic country, and the simplest choice to follow was to be a Catholic, and my family believes and believed in that faith. My dad, before meeting my mom, was actually studying to become a priest. And then he met my mom and he became a dad instead. But the faith that he had still remained with him. And it's something that it starts very, very young. You know, you get taught religion in school, but back in the days, now it's very different from the experiences of my nephew, my nieces, and my goddaughter. I can see that there's a lot more openness to actually different kind of religions and studying about them a bit more. But when I was growing up, there was not a lot of light shed on different cultures and different religions. So, you know, you will maybe touch upon them and their existence, but you wouldn't really go in depth, too much in depth about them. So I grew up very in a very spiritual household. My mom used to pray every day. My dad used to pray every day. He still does to this day, but never in a kind of big way. It was also a family that was very open to questions, and my mom and dad always kind of pushed me towards the asking questions. They were never pushy for anything else apart from ask questions, question everything, because you have to have an opinion and you have to form a conscience. And in order for you to have a moral conscience, you'll have to know the whys. And they never really wanted me to follow something blindfolded and not know why and if I truly believed in it. So by the age of 9 years old, I started going to 7 years old, actually. I started going to after school. In Italy, if you want to take the Holy Communion and the confirmation, you have to go to a course in your church for about 2 years. And I think that I was the most unliked person on that course by the priests and the nuns, because I used to ask so many questions. And, you know, and through the years, obviously, it became more, for me, it became more apparent more and more day by day that there were things about the Catholic Church that I did not agree with, and things that I thought would clash with the holy books that they were using to actually teach religion in school. So, you know, um, it became quite hard for me to carry on believing in the institution of the church. I'm a very spiritual person. I've always believed in spirituality. I've always believed in a higher force. You know, growing up, I would always feel energy. I believe in energy and energy and all things that are made, that are, you know, on this planet, are carry an energy, whether it's negative or positive. And so the more and more I started to explore this concept of energy and humanity and who we are, who we come, where we come from, and if there is a higher force above us. And the more and more I found myself reading about Rastafari and the concept of oneness and this universal law of oneness. And it has evolved through the years, and the more and more I studied into it, the more and more I found that the levity that Rastafari represents was the let's say the spirituality that gets acknowledged with the name, that didn't clash too much with what I believed. Ultimately, what I believe in is the oneness. So, and everything that evolves around that. So having respect for everyone, loving everyone, unconditionally, respecting everybody unconditionally, giving a chance to everybody unconditionally, and respecting the very planet that we're on as Mother Earth, And I think that this pandemic that we are going through, it's a perfect, beautiful example of how, as humanity, we've caused a disruption in the natural cycle of the world. And as soon as we got locked into our houses, we saw some beautiful manifestations of healing that Mother Earth brought upon herself. Animals that we thought were extinct, and they get spotted and they're having puppies, and so I just think that the universal law of kindness and respect and love and being respectful of things that we do not have a lot of knowledge and oversight upon, and respecting the fact that there probably is an higher force that drives us all. And whether you call it Jesus, you call it Allah, you call it, Allah, sorry, or Muhammad, or you call it Buddha, everybody identifies with different things, and the respect of those different beliefs should be at the core of everything that we do.
Kindness does go a long way, and I think we need a lot more kindness in this world right now with all the different things that are happening. But
I think we need more kindness in general.
In general, yeah.
Because I think that there's a massive lack of respect and kindness in the world.
Yeah.
In the simplest things, I like going out the door, and if I bump into my neighbor, saying hello. I love that. It's just saying hi,
Yeah.
It's like I acknowledge you in the world, and you acknowledge me in the world. And the fact that we acknowledge each other justifies the fact that we exist.
Yeah. Those small little acts of kindness can do a lot for different people, and you don't even realize it, So I really do agree with what you're saying. Yeah. In terms of my upbringing and in terms of my spiritual beliefs and stuff like that, I was born into a Muslim family, my dad being a Sunni Muslim, and my mom being a Naviana Buddhist, which isn't really a religious belief, more so a socio-political belief that came about around the India's civil rights movements back in the 40s and 50s. One of our founding lawmakers, a few weeks before he died, founded this movement, which basically gave a voice to the marginalized within the Hindu community, which was the Dalits, the untouchables, who were known as the lowest caste. And so the point of Naviana Buddhism was to break those chains and become free of the caste system. And it was quite interesting to hear about different stories that my mum told me about that movement, because she was one of the first. I think she was born around the time when it was first invented or founded. Sorry. And in terms of, in general, like I said, I was a Muslim, but coming from India as well means that there's a lot of different religious beliefs in our country. So we're very open in terms of, even though there's like a few like political conflicts and stuff like that, we're all very open to celebrating each other's faiths. So although being claiming to be Sunni Muslim, we do take on a lot of different aspects from different faiths, and we are my parents taught me to be open to learn about different religions from a very young age. So and it's because of their childhood backgrounds as well. I already mentioned my mum previously. My dad, being a Sunni Muslim, he did for a long part of his life was brought up in an environment which was where the people around him were caretakers for actually a mausoleum of a Sufi saint. So Sufism, so aspects of Sufism were in his faith as well. And the interesting thing about it is in like Sufi mausoleums or like different temples or whatnot from different faiths, you'll get people of all different faiths coming in. So I could remember from my childhood in that specific mausoleum, there were not only Muslims that were going there were Hindus, there were Sikhs, there were Buddhists, all going there to get blessings. So it was very interesting watching all these different people, all these different faiths going in to get blessings from the same shrine. So I think that's what really motivates me into learning more about different religions as well.
I see that as well, and I think it's like what you both touched on is that oneness and kindness and the acceptance of others as well, and knowing that believing in your faith, but it doesn't mean that you're forcing someone else to believe in what you believe, but accepting them as they are, and accepting that it's their life and how they choose, as long as their intentions and the type of person, the character they have is good. So showing that level of kindness and oneness, and also both of you, Marianna and Shagana, also touched on the aspect of like being open but being supportive, and it's also that human connection as well, apart from the spiritual connection, which is very personal. Very, very interesting to hear all your different journeys and aspects as well that you've gone through.
I do have a question. I had a thought. And I was thinking about like for you, I think it's probably for both you and Samir more so, because I heard from Marianna, like obviously growing up in one religion and then sort of coming to your, exploring another religion. And I was curious for both of you growing up, a lot of our faiths start with the family that you're in. So obviously if you're both born in a family that practices Islam, that's sort of the first religion you're exposed to. Has there ever been, I'm curious, a time in your life that either another religion spoke to you, or there was another interest in another faith system? I was just curious to hear if for either of you, if that was the case.
Well, for me, like I said, there's a little bit of openness in terms of learning about different religions in my family. So definitely, in terms of in general, India is a very diverse place. So you're not going to have people who follow their religious practice like an orthodox belief. So with Islam, with the base teachings of Islam, I've also had the privilege of going to different places of worship and learning about different things. Like I said, even though my dad calls himself Muslim, there's a spiritual sage that people follow, like a saint, who's both recognized in Hinduism and Islam in India. Is this guy named Sai Baba, who was just a regular person, but he did back in, like, I think it was the 18th or 17th century. He was like a poor man who used to do things unconditionally, do good deeds unconditionally, and people worshipped him based on that. Not like actually like celebrated him. I mean, celebrated him, but not like what, I don't know how to explain it. It's
I totally know what you're talking about, actually, because my mom, I grew up knowing about him, and I actually went to India when I was, this is like 10 years ago. I went because my mom's a devotee, and I grew up in sort of a youth community space that like looked at his teachings because his whole, I think, teachings is just this idea of love, like all religions are the same and it's all about love and kindness. So I did remember going to India, and I went, and like I said, about 10 years ago, and it was so interesting to see sort of the hope that he gave people
Yeah.
Especially in like poor communities. And yeah, so for a while, that was something that I was very fascinated about too, which is just this idea that all religions ultimately are trying to give you the same message, which is, yeah, like it's about love and everyone's equal and all that. So yeah, I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. So, Sai Baba was one thing that kept on popping up during in life. So whenever we do come to India, my mom and my dad definitely have take a trip to his temple in Shirdi. So yeah. But other than that, in terms of like growing up, I think I've talked to you guys about this before, but I've had the privilege of going to different places of worship. I went to Catholic school in primary, so I learned more about the Bible and the Old and New Testament before I did the Quran. And it wasn't only until like when I went to secondary school, I went to an Anglican school, just a little more liberal, where I got to go to other places of worship. So I think I went to a Buddhist monastery twice with this Anglican school, as well as a Gurudwara and a Hindu temple as well. So yeah, um, in terms of as well as what I would do in terms of if I were to have children in the future, is to make sure they go to a school which allows the teachings of different faiths, going to those different places of worship and really getting like an intensive learning opportunity, so we could
Yeah,
better understand not only each
absolutely.
other
Because
but
I
other
think,
people.
yeah, because I think that that's what the problem is. That there's a lack of understanding,
Yeah,
right? So you grow up confused and only believing in one-sided stories when actually there's always three different versions of the truth. There's my truth, there's your truth, and then there's the truth.
yeah,
And neither of us will ever know the truth fully because we are made to have an opinion, right? And to make judgment. So,
yeah,
but at least if we were open enough to actually learn unconditionally about all of the possibilities, then we can make an informed judgment and decision on what to follow and what not.
yeah. Open-mindedness and being able to gather all types of knowledge really helps us progress as human beings.
I agree with you completely. And, just listening to everyone, I was reflecting back as well on my experiences and trying to answer Shagana's question as well. So, I left Somalia and quite young, and I came to this country probably when I was about 8, almost 9. So prior to that, I was only exposed to one faith, which was Islam. So I didn't know any other faith other than what my parents believed in and what my family believed in. It was only until I came to the UK and I got the chance to go to a public school, and this is when I started to learn about Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, and all the other faiths as well. And we would make, similar to Samir's experience as well, like we would make visits to churches and temples, and we get an understanding of the different faiths. And the more and more I learned about the different types of religion, as well as also, coming from Africa, you never really get to see quite a diverse community. So the beautiful thing about London is there's so much rich diversity. So not only did I get exposed to the different types of faith and religion, but the different ethnicities and back nationalities and culture and languages. All of those aspects really helped to refine like the person I am, and also it made me assess my religion as well. So I think when I was young, I had, similar to Shagana, I had questions and certain aspects that I wanted to be answered. And the more and more I looked into it on a personal aspect, the more I was able to see, like, I was more connected to Islam. And I guess there were some, similar to what you said, all the faiths have the similar ideology, which is about love, care, understanding, and also doing good and repenting for your sins as well as you move forward. So I saw that, their similarities and their differences, but, the more for me on a spiritual and I guess on a personal connection, it brought back my strong faith and connection to Islam and Allah. So to answer your question, so it by being exposed to different faiths, I became aware of the similarities and the differences, but also more importantly, what I was looking for and what I felt connected to. And that, for me, it's always been, you guys know this as well, like, my drive is to have inner peace and to have a meaningful life. And I think with my ambitions and my I guess in a way you could say purpose is in line with my faith. So it becomes part of my identity and who I am. So I've never really, I guess I've looked into other faiths and I've respected it and I understood where people come from and why, they choose to practice and follow certain ways. And it's, it's made me appreciate that and look for the good and the connection, the human connection, similar to what Marianna said as well. So yeah, it just made, it just brought me closer to my faith and made it more connected in a way as well. So hopefully that answers your question, Shagana.
Yeah. I think as well, I think it's an obligation in Islam to have knowledge of different beliefs as well. So I think it's in the hadith. So
Exactly.
if you don't seek out knowledge of different faiths, then that's a sin.
That's a sin, exactly. Yeah. So it's
That's
encouraged.
That's one thing about Islam that I love, and I don't know about it hugely and deeply enough. And maybe one day, Samir and Farah, maybe we can deepen this conversation so you can teach me some stuff. But there's one thing that always stands out to me is the fact that there is an obligation to knowledge, to seeking knowledge, but also an obligation to give. To those who are not, and that's so different from the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church preaches that you have to give, right, as an institution. So I'm not questioning the belief of the higher force, but the institution. A part of it is, kind of teaching kindness and giving to people, but at the same time, the Catholic Church holds quite a huge amount of wealth acquired in very disputable ways. The Crusades were, something that I used to question all the time when I was young. And the priest at Sunday school was never happy, because I'd be like, how are you telling me that Jesus was a good man if you lot go to war trying to kill people in the name of Jesus? Jesus was, but Jesus, you tell me that Jesus was this man that had no riches and no gold. He walked without a shoe, without shoes, and with a sack as a dress, and you just go and help people and be kind to each other, right? And tell people to be kind to each other. But then you centuries later, you went and killed people in the name of Jesus. How does that make any sense? Right? And the same with the giving. The Catholic Church is an institution that holds most of the wealth of the world, and a lot of it was stolen through conflict. And instead of, there isn't this culture of giving in the sense of it's the church that gives away, but we have this scheme in Italy that the Catholic Church runs, which is, every year they send you envelopes in the post, and you can donate money, but also you can donate through your tax to the Catholic Church, which already holds most of the wealth of the world through conflict. So for me, that never made sense, which is, a big difference with Islam, I think, because every single person of Muslim faith that I have met has had this core belief that doesn't even come across as taught belief, but natural belief that, yeah, of course, I'm gonna earn this amount to share. I'm gonna give 20% away because I can, and nobody has to tell me. Nobody has to send me slips through the post to remind me to do it, or get my money off my tax. I'll do it off my own back because I think it's the right thing to do. So that's something that has always stood out for me, about the generosity. And then, you come to Italy, and Italian families who are Catholics, they're very generous, There's always food for everybody. There's always a they will lend a helping hand. But, I wonder if it's more to do with humanity as opposed to the faith that gets taught to you and trying to, because if there's one thing about my country that sometimes I do not understand, and one thing about the Catholic Church as an institution that I do not quite agree with, is instilling the faith with the use of fear. Or you have to act good, otherwise you'll go to hell. Or you have to do good, otherwise you'll have bad luck, or you won't go to heaven, and you will fear the judgment of and the wrath of God. And when actually I think that the spiritual experience should increase the amount of peace that you gain from it, as opposed to living in fear and being paralyzed of making mistakes in life because you're gonna go to hell. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are. I think in every religion there's a few rotten eggs out there who really make it difficult for others in terms of not only like following practices but doing it freely and not forcing it down your throat. And Islam, especially if you take into account what the media sometimes portrays Muslims as, it's always the rotten eggs that come into the camera lens. And so, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, I find it quite interesting that you say that, because for instance, to me, what stood out all the time, because of the way that I grew up, and because of the open-mindedness that my family instilled in me, I was never taught to judge by the example of one man.
Yeah.
Right. And also, if I was to do that, I probably wouldn't believe in any Italian there is walking on earth. Because the amount of Italians that don't go to church every Sunday, but then go to church on Christmas Eve,
Yeah.
it's just like, it's hypocritical, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that every belief has something, somewhat of a question mark on it. It depends on what you take from it. And I think that also eventually, I think that people shouldn't always absorb every single part of anything, but take what they need to take for themselves, and respectfully leave the rest for others to take, to take on.
Yeah. Farah, I wanted to discuss something with you a little bit.
Yeah.
Just about the plights of Muslims in the West. It's not going to be like a very intense question. Looking at how the treatment has been, because there's been like increased as a response to obviously very terrible acts of domestic terrorism. The response to that has been increased surveillance and security on unsuspecting people. So what do you think the response really needs to be for the community in terms of actually helping, especially young Muslim men who can be vulnerable to these types of extremism? For me, I think because of budget cuts and whatnot, we're not getting enough role models and mentors for young Muslims who get lonely and end up having a morphed ideology to follow. You know what I mean?
I agree with you, and I think especially in the line of work that we do, which is working with young people from the age of 16 and above that come from vulnerable backgrounds and different ethnicities as well. It's a really challenging time, and it's a really good question to ask Samir as well, because I've seen it, it's really hard not only to be a Muslim as practicing Muslim, but also if you come from an ethnic background, from a working class background, it's twice as hard. And then, when you see the news and when you see how, Muslims are sometimes scapegoated as the definition, even when you think of the word terrorism, the first image you think of is a Muslim. You don't think of any other nationality or any other religion. It's that constant narrative that's on the media. And unfortunately, the government and just the general society, there is some really good organizations that's trying to fight that stigma and also show that as a different light. But at the same time, I think, there's not a lot of work done from grassroots upwards.
Yeah.
And also dealing with those psychological and economical issues as well that comes with it. So for me, I think it's a really difficult time to be a young person, because not only are you constantly being fed that, your ideology or your faith is considered as a terrorist or an extremist that's going to cause harm to others, but on top of it, you're trying to survive and move forward. So like, I give you an example, like, you're sometimes you hear these stories of like, you apply for a job, but your name is, it sounds ethnic, and on top of it sounds Muslim. Are you going to get through the door because of all the narrative that's been portrayed against you, and it's portrayed against your faith and your where you come from? Or is it equal opportunity playing in part? And it's one of those really difficult situations. And I think even with me, when it comes to working from grassroots roots up, I've come across situations where I have to really question the ethics of the institutions that we're working with and how they're approaching this particular community and how they're representing them. Is it just all about money and then numbers, and then they just see that, saying that, hey, we achieved that goal and we've helped X number of this organizations or communities? Or is there a real genuine concern to make a difference? And I think, yeah, to go back, it comes down to what I said earlier. Faith is an individual choice, and it should come from an educational point of view that you made, but it shouldn't be used against you to put barriers and stigma against you. And I think, it's already hard as it is being a young person trying to figure out this world that we live in. But on top of it, you're constantly seeing this narrative that's, it's portraying your people and who you are and what you identify with as an extremist. And what you said, Samir, as well, you get with every faith, you get, a certain percentage that is completely delusioned or completely misunderstood the teachings of what the faith is trying to teach, which is, a lot of the time it's about unity, it's about love, it's about acceptance, it's about educating yourself and making, not only a better life for yourself, but your loved ones and your community. Simple things, like Marianna said, saying good morning to your neighbor, that is a blessing there itself. But, how can you practice those things if you're constantly being labeled and scapegoated to be a particular way because of a percentage of your community is lost? And I think, again, it goes back to education. It goes back to those frontline workers that are doing incredible work to fight that war in a way. But at the same time, there's not a lot of support being given to those community members. So in a way, they become part of that invisible champions that really do incredible work, but they don't get the necessary resources to move forward. But yeah, it'd be really good to hear your thoughts as well. What do you think?
Yeah, there's always been those stigmas and stereotypes caused by different, not only like different people, but like I said before, the media narrative, which really can dig into, especially a young developing mind who's trying to find their way into the world. So we need to be like a bit more vigilant in terms of not only teaching young people about our faiths and the different faiths, but also just seeing how their well-being is, because not a lot of not a lot of people don't really dive deep into why people go into extremism and like the causes of it. Like it's usually like a deterioration of one's mental health, I think, and
There's actually this documentary. When you both were talking, I was thinking about it. It's called Jihad, a story of others. It's by a filmmaker. I'm blanking, like Daya Khan, I think that's her name. But it's sort of talking exactly what you both were touching on, which is because I think when there's extremism, people tie that very easily to religion. But I think what her documentary explores is actually it's systematic of social isolation and people who feel very disconnected or have been othered in their communities, and how that drives them to sort of seek, because you have people who in the documentary had taken part in kind of extremist groups and have now kind of come back and are trying to do some of the things that Farah, you were talking about, which is sort of mentor young people, because they've been in those shoes where a lot of kind of that, again, the root kind of feeling being socially isolated from the community that you're in, the school you attend, just trying to find purpose in a lot of ways. And so exactly what you're saying, which is if kind of more resources or more opportunities are available, how that can make such a difference for some of these groups. So, and again, going back to kind of what Marianna was saying, I do think kind of the root of that is everyone's looking for some sort of connection. And I don't think there's a lot of even just smiling at someone or acknowledging someone or learning about someone else, there is kind of these silos that people live in. And I think that can, even not just in a religious perspective, but just politics. And we've seen that just, in the world today, especially with the past election, just this idea that people can really live in their bubbles. And it can kind of create tensions between people feeling like they're not heard, people feeling like they're not seen. And I think that has tremendous effects on how people then show up in life and show up with other people. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I think that, I always get very weird looks when I say thank you and hello to the bus driver when I get on the bus in London. And it's something that strikes me every time, that people look at me as if I've said something really wrong. Well, actually, if the bus driver wasn't driving the bus, I wouldn't get to where I need to go. So it's the least that I could be is grateful, And
it's so interesting because when I lived in London, so there is definitely a cultural, like a North American and like European, like there's a difference in cultural, I don't know if I should say European anymore for the UK, but you know what I mean? Like this, because when I was living in London and then I moved to New York, and I remember when I had moved to London, I was definitely the type of person similar to you, Marianna, where it's like, you wanted to, like I grew up, you say hi to the bus, you thank the bus driver, you talk to people, like if you're waiting in line, it's totally normal. And then I lived in London and I didn't realize how much it had changed me until I moved to New York. And I remember the first time I was like in a park and I was sitting down and somebody at the park just spoke to me. And it was just, I think we were like looking at ducks or something. I don't know what it was, but someone spoke to me. And I just remember being so weirded out. Like I was like, why are they talking to me? Or you go on the subway and people talk. And I realized how much London had changed me because I was so used to not talking to people that you don't know, or like it was a weird thing. And then interesting enough, like after a year in New York, it just became normal again to be like talking to somebody and kind of being invested if something happens on a train to somebody, it happens to everyone. It's not just to that one person. So I think I love that mentality about New York and this idea that, everyone's looking out for everyone, even if you don't really know them. And even if it's for that 5 seconds in the day. So that's something I appreciated, but I definitely noticed it was like a cultural shift from being in London.
Absolutely. And I think, that's what, I don't know, there's something about it, which is this, oh, you shouldn't talk to me, this kind of fear of being spoken to, but also this sense of superiority somehow that, you shouldn't be addressed. And I don't know if it's, because obviously we can't generalize because there are some lovely people, but, I find that there is some sort, especially, I don't want to go into too much into politics, but, the sense of entitlement sometimes that comes with, I want to be unbothered, and it saddens me because I think that that's what makes us human, having like little moments of laughter on the bus when you see, when you catch someone else's eyes that see the same funny thing, and you just, agree by just looking at each other and smiling that was funny, I think that there's that complicity of being, of being human. And I think that a lot of people miss out in this country by not having those moments, because it's literally what makes us human, what makes us realize that we're never really alone in the world. And it makes us belong, sense of belonging. And I think that that's what faith does in a lot of different ways. It gives you an opportunity to feel like you belong to a bigger purpose that is not made just by you, but is guided by something that it's divine.
That's beautifully said, Marianna. And I think that's exactly what we come across a lot with our work, is a lot of the young people and community members that we come across, they've been hit hard with life, and there's a lot of obstacles that they're facing, but all they're looking for is really to feel like they belong, they have a purpose, and they are accepted. And, when it comes to media and when it comes to stigma and stereotypes and all the other aspects that comes with cultural as well aspects, it creates barriers and it creates, these fear aspects as well. And then you become more and more introverted and closed off. And then, it becomes, it goes against the aspect of what faith and religion is teaching. With most religion, it's just about, sense of community, sense of, love, compassion, care, kindness. All those things kind of get lost and get stripped away in a carpet, under the carpet in a way as well. So I think definitely agree with you, and I think those are really valid points about. And I think maybe that's the key thing that we can take away from this conversation is like, how are we living up to, being those role models and like the aspects that we change as one reflecting. So similar to what Shagana said, reflecting back on her experience here in London and how that changed her when she went to New York. We get influenced by so many things. So, imagine young people, all they, they're, surfing through the internet and going through their social media, and all this, if they see one narrative, then that's going to subconsciously feed their mind. And the same thing with society. And that actually brings back our quick story, even with UPress, how we started out. Even the word UPress is a wordplay. It means youth press, or you press the issue that matters to you, which is really, we started on a route of challenging stigma and stereotypes when it comes to BAME communities in the media representation. And through that process, what we realize is like the power comes in the individual, how you train them, how you give them positive influences, how you give them a different, direction. I remember even with some of the young people that we work with, they've never, crossed postcodes, let alone boroughs, to see other parts of the town. And that, that creates, a one aspect of viewpoint. And I think, going back to that aspect, I think, I think for our listeners listening, I think, I ask you this question, reflect and like, how are you making your choices, and how is that affecting how you interact with the world around you and the people that you have, whether it be your family, your neighbors, the strangers that you walk past, and your interactions with them. And thinking about that, and thinking back your faith, whether it be you're an atheist, whether it be a Muslim, Christian, a Jew, whatever religion that you practice, the core essence of it is really like, you're trying to be a good person, you're trying to live a purposeful life, and you're trying to be happy in your choices. But how are you, projecting that to others as well, and how are you being in a way a good role model by your actions? So I think, yeah,
absolutely. I was having this conversation the other day about perception and projection, because perception is projection. And when I was younger and someone told me this, I was just like, oh, whatever, you just whatever, right? With the feisty attitude. But then as I grew older, I actually realized that it's exactly that, all of the things that you have inside that you haven't dealt with are brought up sometimes by seeing that reflect those same things reflected in the behavior of other people towards us. And those are the things that make us upset. So because we know that we have the same traits within us, but we just don't want to accept them because we don't like it, because we have undealt issues within. So when you start then addressing those issues, then you realize how true it is that perception is projection, and how you perceive things and you perceive the world and you perceive yourself, then is how you actually project that onto people. And being aware of it is so powerful.
I agree with you completely there, Marianna. And and I think this is a good point to end podcast. What do you think, Samir? Is there anything else that we haven't touched on, but so far?
No, I think we've come to the conclusion of the podcast. Just before we do finish it off, though, is there any last words anyone wants to say?
I want to echo what Marianna said, and which is kind of linked to everything that we discussed. With every faith, religion, and belief system, it really comes down to love, and it comes down to understanding, and also really your journey itself as well. So looking at the human nature and the human voice and purpose, I think I think for me that's what I'll take away from this aspect, just to really hearing everyone's perspective and journeys as well. It's kind of reinforced my ideology and what I believe in. And it's given a bit more inspiration to focus on the important aspects to make a difference in our community.
I'm just gonna relay what I always say in UPress. Some people laugh whenever I say this.
We love it. Bring it on. Bring it on.
I'd say, oh crap, what do I say? Yeah, learning doesn't stop after graduation, and it's being able to keep open-mindedness and being able to take in knowledge from anywhere and everywhere that really develops you as a human being and really allows you to understand different people and different perspectives. You know, if you keep yourself closed-minded, there isn't any real point of communicating with people and living with people, because if you're closed-minded, then there isn't going to be any solutions to any problems that come up in the world, you know. So on that note, I'm going to finish by saying keep an open mind and learn everything you can.
Thank you, guys. This was very nice.
Thank you, guys, and we'll see you next time on the Hidden Voices podcast.